Albie, there has been a lot of focus on the plight of the rhino, where we are being bombarded by images of rhino that have been hacked for their horns. Now, if I could risk asking you for an emotive answer, what goes through your mind when you see these images and knowing that you are doing everything possible to fight this scourge?
I think at the end of the day, we should be very worried as humanity that all of these are done by people who are part of our race as the human race. That we all of these dastardly deeds happen in our country as well. That our children and our children's children would one day look back and ask us what we did to ensure that we work on or we address the issue of poaching. So every single day of our lives as South Africans, we need to find a way of making sure we play our part. Whether you are staying closer to a park where poachers might be targeting, probably recruiting from your community. With that little information that you have, you give it to the police to take the process forward to arrest those poachers or would-be poachers. Whether you work for a conservation authority or a government department that deals with issues of permit and there's corruption happening there, it's about when you know that there's corruption, you need to move beyond just knowing, but take that information through to the relevant authorities. That on our daily basis, when we know of individuals who are close to us who are involved in poaching, that information is furnished to the law enforcement. So it's about all of us at individual level. Forget government, forget all the other. Let's look at it at an individual level and say, government is doing all of those things, but for government's efforts to be a success, it requires us as individuals to play our part. To when a march is called, when young people like those ones that we saw last week took to the streets, they were saying, we are here to work with you as government. They were saying, we understand that you are putting enough resources into fighting poaching, but we think we could do better than that. And I think it's really a message that we accept. It's a message that begins to say to us we could actually improve in terms of our interventions and our tactics in addressing poaching. But also it's a realization that the international nature of wildlife crime, that these are individuals who issue instructions from somewhere in Asia or sitting somewhere in London. Because to be quite honest, we're not the only country that's been affected by all of this. We just happen to be the one worst affected because we've got the biggest population of the rhino. Zoos in Europe have had to put cameras to monitor movement. The museums in Europe have had to remove rhino horns from their from display because people have been breaking in to steal the rhino horn. So it shows you that this is an international driven syndicate. Of course, with us, we are more on the receiving end of the dastardly deeds because of the biggest population we have as South Africa.
Right, and then my last question. Now, there's a lot of frustration from activists and the general public that so much as even one rhino continues to be poached on a daily basis. Yet the department has assured that all efforts are directed at fighting this poaching issue. But if we could speak at the different anti-poaching measures that you have put in place, you have mentioned there are several different options, but it is taking time. And I think a lot of people on the street and our listeners, they do not realize the lengthy process and the experimentation phase. If you could speak to that and perhaps just explain to them why this is taking so long.
Because you see, when a rhino is roaming in Kruger, and Kruger as a park is bigger than Swaziland as a country. Now, it's bigger than Gauteng as a province. If you look at the amount of police you have to police Gauteng, look at the amount of rangers you have to patrol Kruger, you begin to see the challenge. But you see, because Kruger was not meant to be a cage where animals are caged and someone could monitor them, the animals were meant to roam freely in the wild. It's extremely difficult to monitor every single rhino that moves. But because it's a park where people come, it means that it then exposes animals to poachers. So our interventions are largely to ensure that the parks remain parks and visitors can enjoy the African beauty. But at the same time, our responses on the ground must also be alive to the fact that we are dealing here with organized criminals who are hell-bent on getting hold of our rhino horns. So it's interventions like those. I mean, at the end of the day, really remember, it's about investigations by the police. When someone is arrested, they go to court, they have to plead, and sometimes it's about information that the police get out of individuals who are arrested that assist them to be able to connect the dots and take them to the kingpins or whoever issue instructions. So it might take time, but I mean, the number of arrests to date, it's over 200 people who've been arrested for rhino poaching. And I think from that number you can begin to see that we're making serious inroads in terms of arrests. But of course, parallel to that, the number of rhinos being poached are still increasing. So in the main, it takes all of us to ensure that we work collaboratively with the law enforcement agencies, that we root out any corrupt elements in our systems of permitting, that we all take responsibility when it comes to getting information across to the law enforcement agencies if we know of any plans to poach or to move into any park by any individuals who look suspicious or sound suspicious or are suspicious.
If I may add to this question, if a lot of people have concern, I mean, they're saying, but there is the DNA project, there is the chipping going on, there is this indelible dye option, there's dehorning. And you guys have said numerous times it's experimental, people. You need to understand it's experimental. But people seem to not understand this. They want you, the department, to find one way, one measure, and say this is what we're going with. If you could explain that time frame and why you guys are experimenting in terms of all of these different measures.
The DNA is now part of the legislation, the amendments. Last year when we issued the norms and standards on rhino, the DNA was included as one of them, because we want to use the DNA to assist in terms of law enforcement, but also should a consignment be intercepted in Hong Kong, that you'll be able to send your forensic experts to be able to get the DNA and be able to come back home and link it to any of the rhinos in South Africa. And from that particular information, then you start to connect the dots and try to assist the police to be able to say, if this particular rhino was poached, this horn was taken from a rhino in Madikwe, on which day was that rhino poached, and then from there, that information, then the investigators start using that information. So that process is unfolding in terms of the DNA. The process around the dehorning study was commissioned, and the study said you could dehorn in a country where, in an area, in a small geographical area, because it's easy to manage, but dehorning in an area like Kruger, it's a mammoth task. It's a big geographical space. It's going to be costly, but also there are also other people who are saying, why would you want to dehorn the rhino? Because people come to South Africa to see the rhino, and rhino without a horn, it's a total different rhino. So there are those different schools of thoughts being paraded. Remember, when we take decisions, we take them in a very consultative fashion. We even at the issue of opening trade, there are people who are fiercely opposed to it. The issue of dehorning, there are people who are fiercely opposed to it. So we want to balance this, because we realize that we have to look at all those contestations and all the different views that have been paraded. But at the end of the day, we need to take a decision as government and say this is in the best interest of the rhino and the rhino population in South Africa.
Perfect.
Okay.
That is everything. Thank you, LB.
Thank you, dear.
That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Let me just
Thank
stop
you.
this thing. That was awesome. Let me go give you your coffee.
Sometimes Monday will call in the morning, right? When you drive to work.
Yeah.